aunt moved some things when I saw in front of her house the "Don't Pave Utah Lake" sign. And so I was just confused about that. And so I'm with her right now, and I'll have her introduce herself and tell stuff about that.
Thanks for asking me about don'tpaveutah.org, Bradshaw. Bradshaw saw a sign outside of my house, and a lot of you may have seen signs all around Utah County right now. I am part of a group called Conserve Utah Valley, and I'm part of the leadership team, and one of the issues that we've decided to get involved in is Utah Lake. And there's a project that's being proposed by a development group that wants to dredge Utah Lake entirely and use the sediments to create islands on the lake that would then create housing for 500,000 people and put almost 20,000 acres worth of islands in the middle of Utah Lake. Now they claim that the reason that they want to do this is to help with the health of the lake. But there's a lot of controversy around that. And so one of the things that as Conserve Utah Valley that we have figured out through research and talking with a lot of different scientists and experts and stakeholders around the community is that, number one, we just don't think we should have islands in the lake. Regardless of what the purpose of them is, we think that the lake is one of our most incredible natural resources. And that what we should be doing is trying to figure out solutions to keep Utah Lake healthy and improving without dramatically disturbing the ecosystem or changing the makeup of the lake. And so that to us is most important. Is number one, we just don't need islands on the lake. But number two, we realize that a lot of people don't understand that the lake is an ecosystem in recovery and that it's improving. So we're working really hard to help people understand what's happening with the lake and what the future of the lake should look like.
Why is Utah Lake so important to the ecosystem?
Well, first of all, we live in a desert. So, and I should also say, I am not an expert. I'm not a scientist. What I am is just somebody who lives in Utah and thinks that we live in this beautiful place. And when I look at, all of the change that's happening around us, all of the growth in our community, all of the different, infrastructure that's getting built, we need to do something to make sure that we protect our natural resources. And so that's why I got involved in this. So I'm not a scientist, but because I really care about our environment and I want to see it preserved forever, I started getting involved in this issue and learning about it. So what I've learned from really mostly scientists from BYU and UVU and also the Utah Lake Science Commission is kind of how I learned about it and why I know what I know. So that is exciting to me because that means any of you could figure out why Utah Lake is important and what the health of Utah Lake is, because there's a lot of information out there. But back to your question of why is it important to our ecosystem? If you look at the west, Utah Lake is one of the biggest natural freshwater lakes that we have in the west. And we're sitting in this giant desert, and we happen to live in this valley that has this amazing, huge lake. And it covers so much of our valley. And it contributes so many things to our ecosystem. It's a natural habitat for migrating birds. So if you go down to the shores of Utah Lake right now, there's a really cool project in Vineyard called the Wakara Way Project. And they've been working on restoring habitat for a lot of different species. And so there's bald eagles nesting down there right now. So that's a really cool piece of it. Also, because of the size of the lake and how much water is there, it's creating this amazing storage container for water for us. And it impacts how much rainfall we get and our snowpack in the winter. Because we get a little bit of a lake effect from the evaporation in the winter, that means that we have more snow in the mountains. Bradshaw, you go down to your Aunt Wendy's in Springville every once in a while in the winter. Do they have more snow than we have up here in Lehigh in the winter?
Yeah.
They do, right? So that's a lake effect. It's coming off of Utah Lake and hitting the mountains and snowing. and we're starting to get more snowpack because, or not starting, we always have had more snowpack here because of the lake. So it's important to make sure that we always keep the lake in a good condition and a good state.
What are some problems?
Utah Lake has a long history of being abused by all of us. So if you go all the way back to the pioneers, Utah Lake has an incredible history of supporting us. It's been a huge source of food. It gave the early pioneers access to fish and water, right? So it's done so much for us, but we have done a lot to abuse it. So, at different points in time, there have been a lot of pollution dumped into the lake. If we think back to like the Geneva Steel days, and if you think about wastewater treatment, it's really only in the last couple of decades that we've been careful about what kind of wastewater goes into Utah Lake. Raw sewage used to just go into Utah Lake. So there's a lot of things that are happening with the water quality. And you've probably heard a lot of information coming out about the algal blooms that happen every summer in Utah Lake. So that's one issue. There are definitely algal blooms in the lake, and it's mostly happening because of the high nutrient loads that are in the lake around the wastewater treatment areas, and then in some places with just dense nutrients like from fertilizer runoff and things like that. But algal blooms are an issue. Another thing that people are concerned about with the lake is the level of the water, and it has decreased, right? Because we're in this really long drought. And so we need to be very careful about how we're making sure that water doesn't get diverted from the lake and we continue to send water to the lake.
How is Utah Lake improving?
There are a lot of really cool things happening with the lake. One of the problems that I didn't talk about in the last question, but that the lake has, is there over time been a lot of invasive species that have come into the lake shore and into the habitat. I mentioned earlier, one of the coolest projects that I know of around Utah Lake is called Wakara Way. Again, it's in Vineyard. And what they've done with Wakara Way is created these agreements with landowners right up against the shoreline to allow for cattle to graze along Utah Lake. And those cattle are eating, they call them phragmites, which is vegetation that's invasive around the shoreline. And because of that invasive vegetation, it's taken away habitat for birds and different animals and made it really hard for people to go down and enjoy the lakeshore. But as these cattle have been grazing through, they have been able to reduce a ton of the phragmites right around the lake and created a better habitat around. Another really cool thing is a lot of the governmental agencies that have impact on wastewater treatment are working to improve wastewater treatment plants right now. And that's going to help so much with nutrient load going into the lake. If we can reduce the amount of nutrients that are coming into the lake from wastewater treatment, we start to reduce the nutrients in the lake, which means not that imbalance that creates the algal bloom starts to go away. Another thing that's an amazing piece of news for Utah Lake is people care now. So for a long time, people just weren't paying attention. But because we're in this long drought and people are really worried about water right now, and they're worried about the impact of how all of our population growth is impacting natural resources, people like you are starting to ask questions, Bradshaw. So that's a really cool thing for improving the lake because people are starting to care. So if you take all of that and put it together, the lake is an ecosystem in recovery. And that means over time, if we give these scientific approaches to helping clean up algal blooms in the lake, helping reduce nutrient load, helping to get rid of invasive species, then the lake is going to be in a better, more natural state.
Okay, what can we do about it?
About helping the lake?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that just everyday people can do to help the lake. Number one, go down to the lake. Go have an experience at Utah Lake. Utah Lake is magical. It's such a cool place. And, all the way from the winter when the ice heaves are happening, it's beautiful. Through the summer when people are down there boating. But go out and experience the lake. Go look at the birds. Go look at, all of the amazing species that hang out at the lake. The other few things that are happening right now, tomorrow night, Tuesday, May 3rd, we are hosting Concert Utah Valley along with Representative Kevin Stratton are hosting the second Utah Lake Summit. And we're inviting scientists from the Utah Lake Science Committee. We're inviting different legislators and the public to get together and hear more about the most recent developments legislatively and scientifically for Utah Lake, and helping people be informed and ready to be ready to help with the lake. Another thing that people can do from Conserve Utah Valley's perspective, we really want to make sure that the islands don't happen. And so we're asking people to sign a petition on the don'tpaveutah.lake.org website that expresses our desire to have scientific-based restoration of the lake that doesn't include a big, massive overhaul of the ecosystem to do restoration. So we're asking people to go to sign the petition. So those are some things that everybody can get involved in.
Thank you so much. And now I'm gonna get a sign the petition, and mooch off my friends with boats.
I think that's a great idea. So thanks for asking.